Have you ever heard of a love so strong that not even the fury of the gods could destroy it? Imagine being so beautiful that you spark the jealousy of Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty herself. That's exactly what happened to Psyche, a mortal, who unknowingly provoked the envy of Olympus and was condemned to a cruel fate. But what no one expected was that the god of love himself, Eros, would defy his mother to protect her. What happened next? Betrayals, impossible challenges, a journey to the underworld, and a twist that will leave you amazed. If you love mythology, divine betrayals, and epic twists, stay tuned until the end, because this story will captivate you from start to finish. In a distant kingdom, there was a princess whose birth seemed to be blessed by the heavens themselves. Her name was Psyche, and from the moment she was born, everyone who saw her was amazed. Her eyes sparkled like stars reflected on water. Her hair shimmered like gold under the sun, and her skin was as soft as the most delicate flower petal. As the years passed, her beauty only grew. Psyche wasn't just beautiful, she was stunning, to the point that people would hold their breath when they saw her pass. Soon, her fame spread throughout the kingdom and beyond. People from distant lands traveled just to catch a glimpse of her, as if looking at Psyche were a blessing from the gods. Artists tried to capture her image in paintings and sculptures, but no artwork could truly represent her grace. Poets wrote about her, describing her beauty as something beyond human understanding. Then, an unexpected phenomenon began to occur. The temples of Aphrodite started to empty. Previously, mortals would make offerings and prayers to the goddess of love, asking for passion, beauty, and happiness. But now many turned their devotion to Psyche, admiring her as if she were a living goddess. They even began to say that she was more beautiful than Aphrodite herself. And on Olympus, the goddess of love heard these whispers. At first, she ignored them, thinking that humans would soon return to worshipping her. But the comparisons became more frequent, and her pride was wounded. How dare they say that a mere mortal surpassed a goddess? Jealousy began to boil in her heart. It didn't matter that Psyche had no fault in her beauty, or that she never asked to be worshipped. Aphrodite decided that she needed to teach the young woman who, unknowingly, had taken her place in the hearts of men. And for that, she would use her most powerful weapon, love. On Olympus, Aphrodite paced back and forth in her palace, furious. It was inconceivable that mortals were exchanging their prayers and offerings for a mere mortal. Her pride, once unshakable, was now stained by the audacity of those who compared her divinity to Psyche's. She couldn't let this continue. If mortals forgot her, her influence would diminish, and her position among the gods could be questioned. Action was necessary. With her heart filled with resentment, Aphrodite called her son, Eros. He appeared before her, carrying his bow and quiver full of golden arrows. Young and handsome, he was the god of love himself, the one who could make hearts fall in love with a single shot. "My son, I need you," said Aphrodite, crossing her arms. "There is a mortal who has stolen my glory, Psyche. They say her beauty rivals mine, and this cannot continue." Eros raised an eyebrow, intrigued. He had heard the rumors about the princess, but he never cared about his mother's concerns. Still, he knew that when Aphrodite wanted something, it was better to obey. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Aphrodite moved closer and touched his face with a cold smile. "I want Psyche to fall in love with the most hideous creature there is. Use one of your arrows and make her give her heart to a monster, someone no man would dare love. That way, her beauty will no longer be a threat." Eros hesitated for a moment. His power usually united souls, creating love stories and desires. But this time, his mother wanted him to use his arrows to punish. Still, he didn't dare disobey her. "It will be done as you wish," he replied, bowing his head in respect. Aphrodite smiled, satisfied. "Great. Go to Psyche tonight and make sure she is never compared to me again." Eros nodded and disappeared, ready to fulfill his mission. But neither Aphrodite nor he could have imagined that the fate of that night would take an unexpected turn. In the dead of night, Eros descended into the world of mortals, moving silently through the shadows. He arrived at Psyche's room, where the young woman slept peacefully. The moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating her serene face. Seeing her up close, Eros was surprised. He had heard of her beauty, but nothing had prepared him for what he found. She wasn't just beautiful. There was something about her that transcended appearance, a purity and sweetness that seemed to radiate from her very soul. He approached, holding his bow and drawing a golden arrow. All he had to do was touch and tip to her heart, and she would fall in love with the most terrifying creature that ever existed. But the moment he raised his hand, Psyche shifted slightly in her sleep and opened her eyes for a brief instant. It was 1 second, a fleeting moment. But enough. Eros's eyes met hers. Something inexplicable happened. A feeling he, the god of love, had never experienced before. A warmth filled his chest, his heart raced, and for a moment he forgot why he was there. His hand trembled. The arrow slipped from his fingers and unintentionally scratched his own skin. Eros pulled back, feeling the arrow take effect. He was in love. The fate his mother had planned was interrupted. Instead of condemning her to a cruel love, he felt an irresistible urge to protect her. He couldn't let Psyche suffer. Making a quick decision, he put away the arrows and disappeared into the night. His heart, once free, now belonged to the young woman who was supposed to be cursed. But by acting this way, Eros defied his mother, and defying her would have consequences. Days passed, and something strange began to happen in Psyche's kingdom. Despite her unparalleled beauty, no man dared to ask for her hand in marriage. Princes, nobles, and warriors traveled from distant lands just to see her, but for some mysterious reason, none of them had the courage to court her. Meanwhile, her older sisters, less charming, were already married, living their lives peacefully. The king and queen watched the situation with growing concern. How could their most beautiful daughter end up alone? The priests and advisors of the kingdom began to whisper that something unnatural was happening. Perhaps the gods were offended by the excessive worship Psyche received. Perhaps she had been cursed. Psyche, in turn, felt more and more isolated. No matter how much they admired her, no one seemed to see her beyond her appearance. When she looked around, she saw her sisters happy with their husbands, while she remained alone, like a marble statue, beautiful but untouchable. Desperate for answers, the king made a decision. He traveled to the Oracle of Delphi, the wisest of the gods' messengers. If something was wrong with his daughter, only the oracle could reveal what was to come. And so, without Psyche knowing, her fate was about to be sealed by a dark prophecy. The king arrived at the Delphi temple, his heart heavy with anguish. With offerings in hand, he knelt before the priestess and begged for answers. "O great Apollo, tell me the fate of my daughter. Why does no man dare to take her as his wife? Have the gods cursed her?" The priestess closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Soon, her voice echoed through the temple, carried by the power of the god of prophecy. "Do not expect a mortal husband for your daughter, O king, for her fate is sealed. She will be given to a being who is neither man nor god, a winged monster, feared even by the immortals. Take her to the top of the mountain, dress her as a bride, and leave her there. Only then will what is foretold come to pass." The king turned pale. Those words were like a cruel blow. A monster. His daughter, the most beautiful in the kingdom, destined for a horrendous creature. When he returned to the palace, his face reflected the weight of the prophecy. Psyche soon noticed the change in her father and insisted on knowing the truth. When they finally told her, Tears streamed down the queen's face, and the king, with a trembling voice, declared, "I would rather face the wrath of the gods than lose you, my daughter, but we cannot defy destiny." Psyche, however, did not despair. Although fear tightened her chest, she saw the sadness in her parents' eyes and made a decision. "If this is the will of the gods, I will accept my fate. I do not want my people to suffer because of me." Thus, dressed as a bride, but destined not to a husband, but to an uncertain fate, Psyche was taken to the top of the mountain. Her parents and subjects followed her, crying but knowing there was nothing they could do to save her. When the first winds blew around the young woman, a heavy silence fell over everyone. The moment had arrived, and then something extraordinary happened. Psyche stood motionless at the top of the mountain, feeling the cold wind touch her skin. Her heart raced, but she kept her head high. If the gods had decreed her fate, she would face it with courage. Her parents and the people of the kingdom wept as they saw her there, abandoned to the mercy of the unknown. Then, a different sound cut through the air, a soft but powerful whisper. The wind began to swirl around Psyche, first as a gentle breeze, then as an invisible whirlwind that lifted her body from the ground. She felt her feet leave the earth, but to her surprise, there was no pain or fall. It was as though gentle hands were wrapping around her, carrying her carefully. The wind was not an enemy, it was her guide. It was Zephyrus, the west wind, who, under a mysterious command, was transporting her away from the mountain, gently descending through the valleys and over the forests. Psyche closed her eyes, feeling the lightness of flight. The feeling of fear was replaced by a strange peace. When she finally landed, she opened her eyes and was speechless. Before her stood a magnificent mansion, unlike anything she had ever seen. The columns gleamed like gold, the gardens were filled with unknown flowers, and the scent of the air was sweet and welcoming. The entrance was open, as if waiting for her arrival. Hesitantly, Psyche took a step forward. With each new corridor she explored, she encountered more wonders, rooms adorned with precious stones, tapestries that seemed to move as if telling living stories. Then a soft yet ownerless voice echoed through the hall. "Welcome, Psyche. This house is yours. Everything you desire will be yours." She looked around, trying to find who was speaking, but there was no one. Still, something inside her told her she was not alone. Her fate was not what she had expected. Perhaps the gods had other plans for her. And that night, Psyche's true journey was just beginning. Days passed, and Psyche began to adjust to life in the enchanted mansion. Invisible voices attended to all her desires, bringing her fine clothes, delicious food, and soft melodies that filled the air. Everything there seemed magical, but there was also a mystery that unsettled her. At nightfall, something different would happen. When the shadows took over the sky, Psyche felt a presence. She could not see it, but she knew she was not alone. On the first night, she heard light footsteps approaching. Her heart raced, but before fear could take over, a calm male voice spoke. "Do not fear, Psyche. I am here to be your husband, but I cannot reveal myself to you. Just trust me." That voice was serene, engaging. It did not sound like it belonged to a monster, but to someone who treated her with affection. In the darkness, he touched her gently, and she felt warmth spread through her body. His presence was comforting, and gradually Psyche allowed her heart to open. Nights passed this way. Always in the dark, he would come to her, and together they shared words, smiles, and tender touches. He was kind, attentive, and passionate. Over time, Psyche realized she no longer cared about his appearance. The love growing between them did not depend on sight, but on what they felt for each other. However, one doubt persisted within her. Who was her husband? Why did he never let her see him? Psyche was happy, but curiosity began to whisper in her mind. And that whisper, small at first, soon became a cry impossible to ignore. Despite the enchantment of the mansion and the growing love she felt for her mysterious husband, Psyche began to notice an emptiness inside her. Her days were surrounded by luxury and pleasure, but something essential was missing: her family. She longed for her father and mother, for conversations with her sisters, for the simple comfort of being with those she had known since childhood. The joy she had found in that magical place was incomplete without being able to share it with those she loved. One night, while lying in her husband's arms, she hesitated and whispered, "My love, I miss my family. Could I see them just once? More, just to tell them I'm well?" He fell silent for a moment, and Psyche felt his body stiffen slightly. He seemed reluctant. "Psyche, I give you everything you desire, but I ask that you trust me," he said softly. "The world out there would not understand what we have here. Not everyone wishes for your happiness." She held his hand gently. "I understand, but my father and mother still cry thinking that I was devoured by a monster. Couldn't I calm their hearts?" He sighed, and after a long moment he gave in. "Very well, you may see your sisters, but promise me that you will not let their words plant doubts in your heart. Our love is stronger than any outside voice." Psyche nodded, relieved and eager. The next day, Zephyrus, the west wind, was sent to bring her sisters to the mansion. When she saw them arrive, Psyche ran to embrace them, emotional. But as she looked at her sisters' faces, she did not notice that something new appeared in their eyes: envy. Once again, fate began to weave dangerous threads around her happiness. Psyche's sisters were dazzled when they entered the enchanted mansion. Their eyes roamed the golden halls, the flower-filled gardens, and the jewels scattered as if they were mere decorations. They had never seen such wealth and beauty gathered in one place. "All of this is yours?" asked one of them, unable to hide her surprise. "Yes, and not just that," Psyche replied with a smile. "I am very loved here. My husband is kind, he treats me with affection, and gives me everything I desire." The sisters exchanged looks. The spark of envy began to grow in their hearts. How could Psyche, the youngest, who was always praised for her beauty, have found such a grand destiny, while they, less adored, were stuck in common marriages? "And who is this husband?" asked the other sister, furrowing her brow. "Why? Have we never seen him?" Psyche hesitated. "He comes to me only at night, and I can never see him. He says it is part of our union, and that I must trust him." The sisters exchanged glances again, and now a new feeling joined their envy: distrust. "Psyche, don't you see? This is very strange," said one of them. "Exactly. What is he hiding?" "From you," insisted the other. Maybe he is a horrible monster and doesn't want you to see his true form." Psyche tried to push the idea away. "No, he is kind to me. He treats me with love." "But for how long?" whispered one of the sisters, planting the seed of doubt. From that moment on, Psyche's trust began to waver. At night, when she lay next to her husband, she felt something she had never felt before: uncertainty. And once doubt takes root in the heart, it is hard to ignore. The doubt grew within Psyche like a shadow spreading at dusk. Her sisters had planted a fear that now would not leave her in peace. What if they were right? What if every night she was lying in the arms of a horrible creature, unaware? That night, lying beside her husband, she heard his calm breathing. His touch was still gentle, his warmth still comforting, but doubt whispered in her mind like a sweet poison. Unable to resist her curiosity any longer, Psyche waited until he was deeply asleep. Carefully, she got up and walked over to a small stand where she had left an oil lamp and a dagger. If what her sisters had said was true, she would need to protect herself. With trembling hands, she raised the lamp over the bed. The flickering flame illuminated her husband's face, and Psyche held her breath. Before her stood not a monster, nor a terrible beast, but a young man of divine beauty. Golden hair framed his perfect face, and on his back rested delicate wings, like those of an angel. She immediately recognized who he was, Eros, the god of love. Her heart filled with astonishment and admiration. How could she have doubted him? How could she have feared the one who loved her so much? But then, in her eagerness to see him better, her hand faltered, and a drop of hot oil fell from the lamp directly onto Eros's shoulder. He jolted with pain and opened his eyes. What he saw was Psyche holding a lamp and a dagger. Disappointment and sadness filled his gaze. "Psyche!" His voice came out low, heavy with sorrow. "And you betrayed me." She tried to touch him, tried to explain, but it was too late. With a flap of his wings, Eros rose into the air. "I loved you and trusted you," he said, his voice now distant. "But you chose doubt over love." And without saying anything else, he disappeared into the night, leaving Psyche alone, heartbroken, with tears in her eyes. Psyche fell to her knees, her heart crushed with pain. The warmth of Eros had disappeared, and with it all the magic that filled the mansion. The golden walls seemed to lose their shine, the invisible voices fell silent, and the house, once welcoming, now seemed empty and cold. She pressed her hands to her chest as if she could hold the love that was slipping away. "What have I done?" she whispered, feeling the tears run down her face. For hours she stayed there, staring at the dark sky, waiting, hoping that he would come back. But Eros didn't return. Then something terrible happened. The mansion began to fade away. The walls dissolved like mist, the gardens withered, and Psyche felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. Before she could react, she was swept away by the merciless wind and cast far away. When she opened her eyes again, she was alone in the middle of a barren field. There was no luxury, no comfort, only the hard earth beneath her feet and the crushing weight of regret in her chest. But she couldn't stay there. Taking a deep breath, she wiped away the tears. She wouldn't give up so easily. Her love for Eros was true, and if there was still a chance to bring him back, she would seize it with all her strength. Psyche rose, determined. It didn't matter what it took. She would search for Eros to the ends of the earth if necessary. With a broken heart and determination burning inside her, Psyche set off in search of Eros. But before continuing her journey, there was something that needed to be done. Her sisters, they were the ones who planted doubt in her heart. They were the ones who poisoned her with lies and led her away from true love. And now, as she walked alone in the world, Psyche felt the anger growing inside her. Determined, she went back to her parents' palace, where she found her sisters living as they always had, with no idea what they had caused. Upon seeing her, both were surprised. "Psyche, what happened? Why do you look like this?" asked the eldest, noticing her clothes were dirty with earth and the sadness in her eyes, but Psyche didn't answer with fury. Instead, she took a deep breath, and with a calm expression, she said, "You were right. My husband was a god. But now he's gone, and I'm alone." The sisters exchanged a glance, and something gleamed in their eyes: greed. If Psyche had a divine husband, then maybe one of them could take his place. "Where is he now?" asked the other, trying to hide her excitement. Psyche smiled, hiding her pain. "He fled to the mountain where the gods took me. But I know he is still waiting for me." Maybe, for someone like me, the sisters could hardly contain their euphoria. If Psyche had lost the chance to be the wife of a god, then one of them could become immortal in her place. Without hesitation, each one ran to the top of the mountain where Psyche had been left long ago. When they arrived, they looked to the sky and shouted, "Eros! Come for me, I am far more worthy than Psyche." And then, Without thinking twice, they threw themselves into the void, hoping the wind would carry them as it had their sister. But Zephyrus, the west wind, did not come. Instead of being carried to paradise, they fell straight into the abyss, and their screams vanished into the deadly silence of the rocks. Fate punished them for their envy, and Psyche, without looking back, continued on her way. There was still much to do. Eros was waiting for her somewhere, and she wouldn't rest until she found him. After the tragic fall of her sisters, Psyche continued her journey, wandering through unknown lands. Her heart was wounded, but her determination grew with each step. She knew finding Eros wouldn't be easy, not after what she had done. He was hurt, wounded, and worst of all, he had returned to his mother's arms, Aphrodite. She thought sent a chill down her spine. The goddess of love had never accepted her, and now, with even more reasons to hate her, she would surely not help her. Still, Psyche didn't hesitate. If she wanted to recover her beloved, she had to face the impossible. She went to a temple of Demeter, where priests cared for the fields and harvests. Exhausted, she knelt before the altar and prayed, "Great goddess, help me. I seek no riches, no power. I only want to find Eros. Tell me how I can reach him." The wind blew gently through the columns of the temple, and a voice whispered in her mind, "If you wish to find him, go to Aphrodite. Only she knows where he is." Psyche felt a knot form in her throat. Aphrodite. The goddess had hated her since birth, and now she had even more reasons to wish for her ruin. But Psyche couldn't give up. Following the instructions of the divine voice, she walked to an imposing temple dedicated to Aphrodite. Inside, the scent of roses and incense filled the air, and the marble gleamed under the golden sunlight. Divine servants moved about the hall, casting disdainful looks at Psyche, as if they knew she didn't belong there. And then, on the throne in the center of the temple, she saw her, Aphrodite. The goddess was breathtaking, her skin shining like rosy gold, and her eyes sparkled like the sea at dawn. But her gaze, upon resting on Psyche, was sharp as blades. "Well, well, look who's crawling to me," Aphrodite said, her voice sweet as honey but laced with venom. "The mortal who dared break my son's heart." Psyche swallowed hard but didn't look away. "I know I was wrong, but I love him more than anything, and I will do whatever it takes to prove it." Aphrodite raised an eyebrow, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Whatever it takes," she repeated, pretending to consider. "Very well, Psyche. If you want a chance to see Eros again, you must prove your worth." The goddess stood up and walked toward her, wrapping herself in her luxurious cloak. "I have 4 tasks for you, each one harder than the last. If you fail any of them, you will never see my son again." Psyche's heart raced, but she didn't hesitate. "I accept," Aphrodite smiled, satisfied. "We'll see how long this determination of yours lasts, little girl." And so, Psyche found herself facing challenges that would test her courage, strength, and above all, her love. Aphrodite led Psyche into a large chamber inside the temple. The floor was cold stone, and the air had a faint scent, but the scene before her was discouraging. In the center of the room was a mountain of mixed seeds: wheat, barley, lentils, poppy seeds, beans, and many others. It was an impossible mess. The goddess smiled maliciously. "Here is your first task, Psyche," she said, walking around the pile of seeds. "Separate each type by nightfall." Psyche's eyes widened. The pile was enormous. It was impossible to organize it all on her own in such a short time. But before she could argue, Aphrodite turned and left, leaving her with no choice. Psyche took a deep breath and knelt before the pile. She tried to pick up the grains one by one, sorting them, but soon realized she wouldn't manage. Her hands trembled, and desperation threatened to overtake her. That's when something unexpected happened. A soft buzzing echoed through the hall, and suddenly small shadows began to move over the mountain of seeds. Ants, hundreds of them. They came from every corner, organized like an army in march. Psyche watched, amazed, as the tiny insects worked in perfect harmony. Grain by grain, they separated the seeds into distinct piles, as if they understood her anguish and were there to help. With tears in her eyes, Psyche whispered, "Thank you." Hours passed, and when the sun began to set, the mountain of seeds had been completely sorted. Each type of grain was perfectly separated into its own pile. At the exact moment the last ray of light disappeared, Aphrodite returned. She stopped at the entrance and raised an eyebrow at the completed task. Well, looks like you got lucky," she said, feigning indifference. But Psyche noticed the glimmer of irritation in her eyes. The goddess turned sharply and walked out of the hall. "Enjoy your rest, girl," he said over his shoulder. "Tomorrow we'll see if you can survive the next task." Psyche knew that the worst was yet to come, but that small victory renewed her hope. She still had a chance to prove her love for Eros. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Psyche was awakened by one of Aphrodite's servants. The woman cast a disdainful look at her and led her to a vast field where flocks of golden sheep grazed under the morning light. Their fur gleamed like pure gold, and their eyes were fierce, almost wild. Aphrodite appeared shortly after, her flawless beauty contrasting with the cruel smile on her lips. "Your next task is simple," she said, crossing her arms. "Bring me wool from these magnificent sheep." Psyche studied the animals. At first it didn't seem so difficult, but then she noticed something alarming. The sheep were not ordinary. They rammed into each other, bit anything that came near, and had sharp horns. They were aggressive, furious, as if they were guardians of a forbidden treasure. Psyche's heart tightened. If she tried to approach, she'd be torn apart in seconds. Aphrodite smiled at the sight of her fear. "I hope you're smarter this time, Psyche," she taunted. "I don't want another pathetic spectacle." With that, the goddess turned and left, leaving Psyche alone in front of the golden sheep. She took a deep breath. She needed to think. She couldn't act impulsively. It was then that she heard a whisper. "Psyche." She turned and saw a reed by the river, swaying gently in the breeze. Its voice was low, almost a murmur. "Don't approach them now," advised the plant. "During the day, these sheep are driven mad by the heat and attack anything they see. But at dusk, when the sun sets, they calm down and rest near the bushes." Psyche listened attentively. "What should I do?" she asked, hopeful. The reed continued. "Once they sleep, go to the bushes. The golden wool gets stuck in the thorny branches. You can collect it without having to face the sheep." Psyche felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you." She followed the advice and waited patiently. The day passed slowly, and she kept herself hidden, watching the sheep. The heat made them even more aggressive, but as the sun set on the horizon, they began to calm down. When night fell, Psyche silently walked to the bushes and, to her delight, found tufts of golden wool stuck in the branches. She collected as much as she could, forming a brilliant bundle in her hands. With her heart racing, she returned to Aphrodite's temple and presented the golden fleece to the goddess. Aphrodite took the wool, examined it, and sighed dramatically. "Once again, you were lucky," she murmured, hiding her displeasure. She threw the wool aside and narrowed her eyes at Psyche. "But there's still much to prove. Let's see if your luck lasts until the next task." Psyche knew this was far from over, but despite her fear, she felt stronger. Eros was still waiting for her, and she wouldn't give up on him. At dawn the next day, Aphrodite called for Psyche again. This time, the goddess was even more impatient, as if her frustration grew with every task the young mortal completed. "You've done better than I expected, Psyche. said Aphrodite, crossing her arms, "but let's see how you handle this challenge." She pointed to a distant mountain, where a thin silver waterfall cascaded from the rocks like a veil of light. "Bring me a jar of water from the river Styx," she ordered. "But be careful. This is no ordinary river." Without further explanation, the goddess turned and disappeared, leaving Psyche alone with her new challenge. Psyche sighed and began her journey to the mountain. The path was steep and exhausting, but when she reached the top, she understood why Aphrodite considered this task impossible. The river Styx was one of the sacred waters of the underworld. The silver waterfall fell from a deep crack in the rocks, surrounded by slippery cliffs. In addition, dark creatures guarded the place, winged serpents gliding between the stones, their eyes glowing like embers. The mere sight of them made Psyche shudder. She tried to approach, but the serpents hissed threateningly, opening their mouths and showing sharp fangs. One wrong move, and she would be thrown to her death. Desperate, Psyche looked up at the sky, seeking help. It was then that a swift shadow crossed the air. A giant eagle with golden wings descended from the heights and landed beside her. Its piercing eyes met hers, and Psyche instinctively knew that this was a messenger of Zeus. "Foolish mortal," the eagle squawked, tilting its head. "Only a madman would try to collect this water with their own hands." Psyche lowered her eyes, feeling powerless. "I have no choice. I need to complete this task." The eagle studied her for a moment, then, without another word, grabbed the jar she was carrying and took flight. Psyche watched, astonished, as the majestic bird dove into the mist of the cliff, skillfully avoiding the serpents. The beating of its wings pushed the creatures away, and with a precise motion the eagle filled the jar with the sacred water from the Styx. Upon returning, it landed before Psyche and handed her the jar. "Now go," it said, "and don't waste this help." With her heart pounding, Psyche thanked the eagle and carefully descended the mountain. When she reached the temple, she presented the water to Aphrodite, who took the jar with a stern look. "So, you managed again," she murmured, pressing her lips together. Psyche said nothing. She knew Aphrodite would give her no respite, and that the next task might be even worse, and she was right. The goddess smiled coldly. "Now, there's only one last test, the hardest of them all." Psyche swallowed hard. She had already faced so much, but giving up had never been an option. "I'm ready," she replied. Aphrodite let out a low laugh. "Let's see. You'll have to go down to the underworld." Psyche felt a chill run down her spine as she heard Aphrodite's words. "You heard me right," the goddess continued, crossing her arms. "I want you to go to the underworld and ask Persephone for a jar of her beauty. After all, my long concern for Eros's well-being has worn me out. I need a touch-up." The irony in her voice was evident. Psyche knew Aphrodite didn't need more beauty, but this was just another cruel punishment. Going to the underworld meant facing death itself. With no other choice, Psyche set off. During her walk, desperation began to take over her. How could she enter the world of the dead and come out alive? It was then that as she passed an ancient stone tower, a deep and wise voice echoed, "Psyche." She stopped, looking around. "Who's there?" The tower, as if it had a life of its own, responded. "If you want to survive the journey, listen carefully. There is a path for the dead, but not for the living. You'll need to deceive Hades himself to return." Psyche held her breath. "What should I do?" The tower gave her detailed instructions. "First, take 2 coins in your mouth. They will be the passage to Charon, the ferryman of the river Styx. Without payment, he won't let you cross. Second, take 2 loaves of bread soaked in honey. They will calm Cerberus, the 3-headed dog who guards the gates of the underworld. Third, don't accept anything offered to you on the way. The underworld will try to deceive you and trap you there forever. Psyche listened carefully and, determined, followed the instructions. She reached the dark entrance to the underworld, where shadows whispered forgotten secrets. She placed one coin in her mouth. Soon, Charon appeared in his black boat, with empty eyes and grey skin. Without a word, he took the coin and allowed her to board. Crossing the river, Psyche saw lost souls dragging themselves through the dark waters, lamenting their past lives. But she stayed focused, ignoring the wails, remembering the warning from the tower. Upon disembarking, she encountered Cerberus. The massive dog growled, its 3 heads turning towards her, eyes glowing like embers. Quickly, Psyche threw one of the honey-soaked loaves. The monster sniffed the sweetness and devoured it, calming enough to let her pass. Psyche continued to Persephone's palace, where the queen of the underworld greeted her with a curious look. "What brings a mortal to my realm?" Persephone asked, her voice echoing through the grand dark hall. Psyche knelt. "My lady, Aphrodite requests a jar of your beauty so that she may regain her splendor." Persephone smiled, perhaps finding amusement in the request. "If Aphrodite desires, then it shall be." She took a small golden vial and filled it with an invisible essence, sealing it carefully before handing it to Psyche. "Now go, and remember, do not open this vial." Psyche nodded and began her journey back, retracing the same steps with caution. She paid Charon with the second coin, calmed Cerberus with the other honey cake, and finally returned to the world of the living. However, as she held the vial in her hands, doubt began to grow within her. If this is the beauty of a goddess, maybe I should use a little before giving it to Aphrodite. Persephone's warning echoed in her mind, but the temptation was stronger. With hesitant fingers, she opened the vial, and in that instant everything went dark. As soon as Psyche opened the vial, expecting to find a magical essence that would make her even more beautiful, a thick, dark mist escaped from inside. Before she could react, the vapor enveloped her face, and an irresistible weight took over. Her body, her eyelids became heavy, her limbs lost strength, and unable to resist, she fell to the ground, plunging into a deep sleep, a sleep akin to death. After all, the vial did not contain Persephone's beauty, but the lethal sleep of the underworld. Lying on the dry grass, her serene face looked like a sculpture, beautiful and still. The wind gently blew around her, stirring her dark hair, but Psyche did not move. There, between life and death, lay the young woman who had defied gods and monsters for love, now fallen because of her own curiosity. Time passed, and the world kept turning. But somewhere above the clouds, on Mount Olympus, Eros was already recovered. His strength had returned, and his heart, though wounded by betrayal, could not forget Psyche. He tried to ignore the pain of separation, tried to follow his mother's orders, but something inside him urged him to find her. His love still burned, and her absence was unbearable. And so, unable to bear another second away from Psyche, Eros opened his golden wings and flew fast as an arrow shot from his own bow. He followed his instincts, which guided him to where she was. When he saw her fallen, motionless, a tightness gripped his chest. He landed beside her, kneeling. "No," he murmured, gently touching her face. She did not respond. Her chest barely rose and fell. Her skin was cold. He noticed the fallen vial beside her and understood what had happened. "My foolish and beloved Psyche, you never knew how to wait." With a sigh, he took one of his arrows and with a gentle gesture touched its tip to her lips. The deadly sleep began to slowly dissipate like mist at dawn. Psyche's eyelashes fluttered. Her breath returned, and then her eyes opened. The first thing she saw was Eros's face. Her heart raced. "You came back for me?" Eros smiled, relieved. "I never should have left you." Psyche felt tears welling up in her eyes, but before she could speak, he pulled her into a tight embrace. Now they were together again, but there was still something that needed to be done. Eros stood up, holding Psyche's hand. "Let's go to Olympus. I won't let my mother interfere any longer. It's time we settle this once and for all." And without hesitation, he took her with him, ascending to the heavens. Eros flew high, cutting through the clouds like an arrow shot by the gods themselves. Psyche, safe in his arms, felt the cold wind on her face, but her heart was warm, not just from their reunion, but because she knew there were still challenges ahead. As they passed through the golden gates of Olympus, the gods watched them with curiosity. The celestial hall was filled with imposing figures. Hera, the queen of the gods, cast an evaluative glance at Psyche. Ares, the god of war, smiled perhaps, appreciating his half-brother's audacity. Athena raised an eyebrow, always analyzing everything with wisdom. But it was the figure on the highest throne that mattered. Zeus watched them with interest. His expression was enigmatic, but his eyes sparkled with amusement. After all, Eros, the mischievous god of love, was here, not to play tricks on mortals, but to make a request. Eros landed before the king of the gods and knelt, gently pulling Psyche so that she did the same. "Great Zeus, I come to you seeking justice. Aphrodite, my mother, has punished Psyche repeatedly, but she has proven her worth by overcoming each challenge. Now, I ask that you grant her immortality so we can be together without any more barriers between us." There was a murmur among the gods. Hera narrowed her eyes. Hermes, the messenger, smiled, seeming to enjoy the boldness. Zeus tilted his head, thoughtful. "Immortality, you say?" Eros held his gaze. "Yes, my lord. Psyche has shown courage, loyalty, and strength, qualities worthy of the gods. She even faced the underworld and returned." Zeus drummed his fingers on the arm of the throne, observing Psyche. She held his gaze, feeling a chill down her spine, but did not look away. Then Zeus let out a low chuckle and rose. "Very well. I will grant what you ask, Eros." Psyche's eyes widened in surprise. Had she heard correctly? However, Zeus continued, and the silence in the hall grew heavy. "In return, Eros, I want you to bring beautiful mortals to Olympus from time to time. After all, even gods appreciate a little human charm." Eros hesitated. He knew that Zeus always had hidden motives, but if this was the price to secure eternity with Psyche, he would accept. "As you wish, my lord." Zeus smiled, satisfied. He extended his hand, and in his palm, a golden chalice materialized, filled with divine nectar. Then he turned to Psyche. "Drink, mortal, and become one of us." Psyche looked at the chalice. Her heart pounded in her chest. From the beginning of this journey, she had been humiliated, tested, wounded. Now, her life was about to change forever. She took the chalice with trembling hands. She looked at Eros, who gave her an encouraging smile, and then took a sip. The liquid was sweet, warm, and as it slid down her throat, a warmth spread through her body. She felt something change inside her, a lightness, a glow. Her skin became even more radiant, her senses sharpened, and suddenly she understood. She was no longer a mere mortal. Psyche was now immortal, and in Olympus, love and soul could finally remain united forever. As soon as Psyche drank the divine nectar, a transformation took hold of her. Her body shone with a golden light, and a sensation of weightlessness flowed through her bones, as if the air itself now supported her. She no longer felt fatigue, hunger, or pain. She was now part of the gods' realm. Eros watched everything with admiration. His heart overflowed with love and pride. She had faced so many challenges, so many trials, and now she was by his side as his equal. The gods around them murmured among themselves. Some seemed pleased, like Hermes, who let out a low whistle. Others, like Hera, watched with suspicion. But it was Aphrodite who broke the silence. The goddess of love and beauty rose from her seat, her eyes fixed on Psyche. The entire hall held its breath. Everyone knew how much Aphrodite had tried to prevent this union. Psyche held the goddess's gaze, bracing for the worst. But, to her surprise, Aphrodite smiled, a small but real smile. "It seems that Zeus has seen something worthy in you, mortal." She paused, correcting herself. Or rather, former mortal. Psyche didn't know what to say. She had expected fury, contempt, another challenge, but here was Aphrodite, resigned. Perhaps she had realized that there was nothing more she could do to separate them. The goddess sighed and, with an elegant gesture, turned to Zeus. "If this is the will of Olympus, I accept." Eros relaxed. Psyche, still in shock, felt a wave of relief. Zeus raised his cup and proclaimed, "Let the celebration begin, for today Psyche ascends as one of us, and her love with Eros will be eternal." The gods cheered. The hall filled with celestial music, and a feast appeared before them, overflowing with ambrosia and divine wine. Psyche could hardly believe it. After so much suffering, so much fear, she was now here, beside Eros, among the gods, with no more trials or threats. She intertwined her fingers with his and smiled. Now Olympus was her home, and their love at last was beyond the reach of fate. Olympus rang with celebration. Celestial harps echoed through the golden hall, while nectar and ambrosia flowed in endless feasts. The gods laughed, toasted, and watched with curiosity as the union against all odds triumphed. At the center of it all, Psyche and Eros stood side by side, ready to make their union official in front of all the gods. Hera, the goddess of marriage, rose from her throne and with an imposing gesture silenced the hall. Her gaze settled on Psyche, assessing her. The young woman felt a flutter in her stomach. Would Hera be favorable to the marriage? The goddess tilted her head slightly and declared, "Let all present bear witness. This union is blessed by Olympus. May the love of Eros and Psyche be eternal and bring harmony between the gods and mortals." As she spoke, she raised her hands, and as if responding to her command, a shower of golden petals began to fall throughout the hall. The air filled with a heavenly fragrance, and everyone present cheered in celebration. Eros turned to Psyche, holding her hands. "We've faced everything to get here," he whispered, his eyes shining with emotion. "Now, there's nothing that can separate us." Psyche smiled, feeling every word of his echo in her heart. Zeus, pleased with the celebration, raised his cup and declared, "Let the dance of the newlyweds begin." With a swift movement, Eros pulled Psyche to the center of the hall. The music began again, and they started moving in perfect harmony. Eros spun Psyche with ease, and now that she was also immortal, she seemed to float as she danced. Her feet barely touched the ground, and each step seemed guided by fate itself. The gods watched, enchanted. Even Aphrodite, reluctant at first, gave a small smile as she saw her son glowing with happiness. The night continued with endless celebrations. Love had triumphed, and so among the gods, and under the golden light of Olympus, Eros and Psyche were united for all eternity. Time passed, and the happiness of Eros and Psyche blossomed in Olympus. United forever, their love became an eternal flame, untouchable by jealousy, trials, or doubt. But something even greater was yet to come. One morning, as the golden sunlight streamed through the divine halls, Psyche felt a change within her. It was a gentle warmth, a new sensation, unlike anything she had ever experienced. She placed her hands on her belly, and in an instant of pure understanding, she smiled. She was carrying a child. Eros, upon hearing the news, was overjoyed. Their love would now give rise to a new life, a being that would symbolize everything they had achieved together. When the news spread throughout Olympus, the gods gathered once more. Zeus, from his throne, looked at Psyche with interest. "You were not just a mortal," he said, his voice reverberating through the hall. "And now you carry a new promise, a fruit of divine love." Aphrodite, who had resisted Psyche's presence among the gods, did not show any discontent this time. On the contrary, there was something like pride in her gaze. After all, this child would be her granddaughter. When the moment came, the entire Olympus celebrated. Psyche gave birth to a girl of radiant beauty, whose laughter was as sweet as the nectar of the gods themselves. Her name was carefully chosen, for she represented the perfect result of the union between soul and love. Voluptas, also known as Hedone, the goddess of pleasure and happiness. The gods hailed her arrival, for she would bring with her the essence of pure delight, the joy that unites mortals and immortals. And so, Psyche's destiny was fully realized. From a simple mortal, she became a goddess. From a lost soul, she became eternal. And from her love with Eros, pleasure itself was born, proving that even in the face of the toughest challenges, love always finds a way to triumph. In Olympus, among the gods, Psyche finally found her place. And alongside Eros and Voluptas, she lived forever in infinite happiness. At the height of the divine celebration, as Olympus glowed with golden light and celestial melodies filled the air, the moment arrived that would seal the fate of Eros and Psyche for eternity. In a sanctuary adorned with rare flowers and flickering candles, the gods gathered to witness a miracle that would symbolize the perfect union between soul and love. It was there, before Zeus and the other immortals, that Psyche, now full in her immortality, gave birth to a girl whose smile radiated the sweetness and lightness of a dream. The child, with bright eyes and hair that resembled sunbeams, seemed to have inherited all the beauty and purity of her mother, but with a special glow that enchanted even the hardest of hearts. Aphrodite, though reluctant at other times, could not help but be moved when she saw the new being that had emerged. Zeus, with his stern and just gaze, solemnly declared, "Let this child, whom we shall call Voluptas, be the personification of pleasure, delight, and the harmony that only true love can bring. May her existence remind all that, even after the cruelest challenges, love has the power to transform destiny." And so, amidst the applause and laughter of the gods, little Voluptas was welcomed into the heart of Olympus. Her birth not only represented the union of Eros and Psyche, but also symbolized the triumph of love over trials and the dawn of an era where joy and pleasure would be present in every corner, both among the gods and mortals. With Voluptas' arrival, Olympus was filled with a renewed energy, a timeless reminder that even amidst the shadows of doubt and vengeance, the light of love and pleasure would always find a way to shine and unite hearts. And thus ends the incredible journey of Psyche, the mortal who defied the gods and proved that true love overcomes any obstacle. Her destiny, marked by challenges and trials, led her to immortality and to live forever with Eros. And what do you think of this epic story? Leave your comment below. We'd love to know your opinion. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button to support the channel, and of course subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any more amazing stories. See you in the next video. Until then,